All right, you ready? You good? All right. All right, welcome. Welcome. My name's Brian Roschetzky. Welcome to my channel. Would like to welcome Sass. He is running for Congress here. And Sass, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us why you're running for Congress and how these guys can find you. Did you have a point where you started? Did you have a point where like it clicked where it started? Like it kind of made sense that this is what you were going to do? Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's great. That's, because when I met Sass, I met him at an electric charging station during the winter storm. And that's kind of where I met him. And that's kind of where, this whole thing kind of arose. Um, what, what about you do you think that has, you drive an electric car as well. What about you personally, like, has made it easy for you to switch? Or, was it something that you wanted to do, driving an electric car? Is that something that, like, was kind of like politically motivated because it's green, or financially, or, what about it, like, made sense to you to actually do that? Mm-hmm. Me neither, technically. Hmm. Yeah. There's like a safety inspection though, right? There's like a safety inspection though, right? A safety inspection? Nothing. No, so no emissions, no safety inspection. Because even in Austin, we've had like in a safety inspection, but then an additional emissions inspection in Austin longer than the rest of the state. And I remember when I first moved here, we had to many people. And I remember I think I might have even done it. I was pretty young, right? And I just didn't really think about it or know better or like think about what I was doing. But for me, it saved me money. But I would like you would drive out of the city and get your emissions test done because they didn't do it out there, and then eventually the whole state. But anyways, go ahead. Sorry. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. Hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I was gonna ask that. Okay. Cool. So. Yeah. Cool. Yep. Yep. I was there. Yep. Cool. All right. Well, great. That's amazing. I really wanted to know. I really personally wanted to know myself. I always feel it's very interesting because it's like definitely in a few years we're gonna, or like in the future we're gonna look back at this and be like, wow, we were so limited on our options. Like we had the Fiat 500e, we had the Nissan Leaf, the Kia Soul EV if you were lucky, and like maybe that was really it. Like there weren't really too many, and then you had the Teslas, and now I guess we have a few more, but still not too many, not too many more, unless you're like paying high premium. Or the Bolts, the Bolts. You're definitely right. Yeah, and that's actually the Bolt is one of the top sellers. I think out of all the electric cars. So I'm really interested in seeing what's going to come because I do feel the space here will kind of continuously like the prices won't come down very much from that. They're gonna because a lot of the cars are gonna be bigger and nicer. You know, like the I-Pace and all these other like SUVs and crossovers. So that first like smaller, that's what. Yeah, huge. Yeah, really expensive. 100,000 ish. Yeah, 90,000 ish. Yeah. Yeah. As far as like regulatory things, do you know anything about this is just kind of on the cusp, like side mirrors and like regulation things like that, or like, I mean, that's just like one of those things where the, the kind of regulatory thing, they either pass it or they don't pass it. It's just like a matter of time, kind of a thing. Or is that just something that's just kind of, you know what I mean? Yeah. 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 Until it's like proven. Yeah. Yeah. I think even the Honda E, I believe, has side mirrors, and I believe fully charged had a video on it, and I think that was somewhat of a complaint, and it might have been a different video or someone else, but I remember hearing a complaint about how they fogged up a little bit because they were cameras. And cameras aren't always perfect, kind of like how the trunk camera, sometimes the trunk camera looks crisp and clear and it looks like a nice, almost, like, wow, that's like a nice HD quality. But other times, if it's rainy or whatever, then you look out of it and it's like foggy and kind of has like mist over it, and that's maybe, yeah, not a good thing for a side mirror when it's more safety involved. Yeah. 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 Yeah, because I wonder what we're going to see on the Cybertruck, if we're going to see this. Yeah. 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 Cool, cool. So let's see what other. I know one of the topics I've heard you talk about a lot is voting, the voting system, and that I like the idea. Um, let's just let's just get into that. I don't know why it was just on the top of my head right now. Let us tell us. I want to hear about your ideas on the voting system, and I heard you speak about a star system. Let me know more about that. I want to know more exactly about the your voting system idea. And it's not yours. I'm sure. I'm sure that I've heard this. I've heard many other people talk about this as well.
That way of voting, you just bubble among your candidates, it's actually the worst possible method. That's as bad as it gets. It doesn't really get any worse than that. Kind of. I sort of have an argument for another system that I think is worse, but we can come back around to that. But yeah, it's really horrendous, and one of the effects that it has is a trend toward a two-party duopoly, and that's math. It's called Duverger's law. Duverger''S. Duverger's law. And this is just, I'm not gonna, and a lot of it just comes down to this spoiler effect that's talked about so much, where like you have two popular candidates who are like neck and neck, and then another candidate comes in, and they quote unquote like steal votes away from one of the candidates and makes them lose instead of win. And so like this is a feature, or a flaw, I should say, not a feature. It's a flaw of the system and of other voting systems as well. Some voting systems have it, some voting systems don't. And so this spoiler effect will always cause a trend toward a two-party system, a two-party duopoly. Unavoidable. It's just math. So, like I said, it's okay. So that's awful. What do I recommend? There are two systems that I recommend: star voting and approval voting. So let's start with star voting. I like to describe star voting as the ultimate culmination of modern voting science. It was invented in 2014 in Oregon. STAR is an acronym. It stands for Score, Then Automatic Runoff. So the first thing that you do is you score you have all the candidates on your ballot, but you score all of them from 0 to 5 stars. Right? When it's 0 to 5, however you like, you can score multiple candidates the same. You can draw big differences between them. But so you score all the candidates, and then you add up the scores of all the candidates across all the ballots. And then what you do is you take the two candidates with the highest sum total scores, and you eliminate all the other candidates. You're just taking these top two. And the next thing that happens, so this is all kind of step one. I'm really drawing it out to just add clarity. This is really all one step.
Mm-hmm.
So step two is then between these two candidates, whichever one is preferred by more voters wins. So the actual easier way to understand this is whichever of you scored higher, that candidate gets your one full vote. You don't have to score either of them high. You just have to score one higher than the other. So one of them could have been 1 star, the other could have been 0 stars. One could have been 5, and the other one could have been 3. It doesn't matter. Whichever one you scored higher, that candidate gets your one full vote. Whichever candidate with the most of those one full votes wins. And this produces astoundingly accurate results, like really like off the charts. It's really incredible, the quality of results that come from this. Now, there's a bit of a hiccup. We live in the real world. You can run into difficulties with getting STAR implemented, not as much as some other systems, but for example, for a small jurisdiction with, let's say, 500 people on it, $300 to spend on an election, going up to them and telling them, okay, now you got to spend thousands of dollars or tens of thousands of dollars on getting voting machines, or like training people and redesigning your ballot and doing this whole voter education campaign. That's a really hard sell. Also, election codes are different in every state, and they get real wonky. Some of them are just really weird. And so you can run into problems with that, legal viability. And also municipalities tend to have their own election codes as well, although those are a little bit easier to change. So there can be roadblocks to STAR in some jurisdictions in the United States, which is why I also advocate for approval voting. Now, before I move on to approval voting, does STAR voting make sense?
Yeah, I think it does. I only think that it's really hard to change anything in America. You know, it's hard to change, when someone is doing something already. It's hard to change something. I think, yeah, there's so many roadblocks. My other thought in the middle of that was, like, what kind of corruption or what kind of, like, power or money is standing in the way of, like, changing anything about, like, our system? Or is that just something that, like, could be passed like anything else, and might not have that much, like, roadblock? But yeah, I think it does make sense, because I feel that you're always in that kind of situation, or like you have people that like don't even vote at all because like they think that maybe that one person won't win, but they kind of want to vote for these two people. The kind of people that are like undecided, and then it would be nice if they would have a way of like voting like a backup choice.
Yeah, a more expressive ballot is what you're talking about,
Yeah.
which is exactly what anything other than choose one is. So star is in score ballots are about as expressive as it gets. So that's what star uses a score ballot. So really expressive ballots will also bring a lot more people to the polls because there are a lot of non-voters who don't vote because they feel they can't express their true opinions on their ballot.
Sure.
But I also want to address, before I move on to approval, I want to address this concern you had about like just like the challenges of getting change. Like voting reform is very much a ground up movement in the United States. It's very much follows the same path as like marriage rights or like that marijuana is going through right now, where it just starts in a city and then it goes to counties and then it goes to states, and if enough states take it on, then it gets done nationwide. And this is like, not every country's like this. This is like, we are lucky that in the United States we are able to do voting reform from the ground up. And like that's the reason I say that's lucky is because the voting system is like the most important thing. Like of all of, and you can this is objective actually. You can model the Bayesian regret, right? So the real world human feelings of different types of societal change. And in the United States, the thing that tops the charts for like biggest change in Bayesian regret for like any societal change would be changing the voting system in the United States. Like more so, it's actually a greater effect than switching from dictatorship to democracy. Again, this is you can model this. There is math behind this. Switching from choose one, winner take all to a quality voting system will have a greater effect on society than anything else you could possibly do on its own. And so this is like a really powerful and important thing, and we have the ability to do it in the United States through this kind of classic ground-up reform. But I want to move on to approval voting. So, like I said earlier, there can, in some places, be roadblocks to star voting. So approval voting is comically simple. It is changing the language on the ballot from choose one to choose one or more. So instead of bubbling in next to one candidate, you can bubble in next to as many candidates as you like, or all the candidates you approve of. And then the tabulation is the same. You count up all the votes or all the approvals, and whoever gets the most approvals wins. And this one tiny, simple change creates dramatic, like it makes a huge difference. The results get so much better. They're not quite as great as star. They're not quite as accurate, but they're still really, really good. I like to describe approval voting as the highest and fastest return on investment for any voting system shift in the United States right now. You really just get your bang for your buck. It's power and simplicity. Because it requires zero change to voting infrastructure, it's a viable sell for small jurisdictions, more compatible with more election codes. And the voter education campaign is as quick and cheap and easy as it gets because it's such a simple change. So there are reasons to fight for star voting in some jurisdictions. There are reasons to fight for approval voting in others. I'm currently working with the Center for Election Science to get approval voting for Austin City Council elections. And I will have more updates on that on my social media as we learn more and we're getting the campaign up and running. We get more second opinions and stuff, legal stuff. But yeah, there are these are the two I recommend. So I've talked a lot. I want to pause and I want to let you respond, Brian.
Yeah, I guess the only other thing is, I love all that because we want that to happen. But I guess the question here, even like I think Robert was kind of even asking here, is that how could money be affecting this, right? It's always like what kind of money or what kind of power is going to be standing in the way of like this kind of change?
Yeah, this and that's a valid question. So I mean, obviously, like the important bit about this being a ground up change is that this threatens the power of corrupt politicians, right? And very much like if you were a politician who got elected, why would you want to change the system that got you elected?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So that's why it really does need to be this like citizen-led effort. You can have citizen-led ballot initiatives in 26 states. There are 24 that you cannot. And so like that's 26 states that have like a very real possibility of voting reform that can't be blocked by legislators. Unfortunately, Texas is not one of those. But we'll make it work with approval voting. We'll make it work anyway. We'll figure it out. Yeah, I mean, it's like none of this is ever going to be easy, right? Like nobody's saying, like nobody's pretending it's going to be easy. It's going to require a lot of work. It's going to require a lot of time and effort, energy, resources, money of our own, right? Donation. It's going to, there's a lot that needs to happen here. One of the things you can leverage though is candidates who have lost their races. They tend to be if you go up to a candidate who's lost their race, they tend to be very open to the idea of voting system reform, and they tend to have at least some name recognition already, and so they can be very powerful allies in this fight as well. Among others, it's also just getting the right people on board and getting people to understand it. But yeah, it's a fight. This is no walk in the park. It's a fight, but it's a fight worth fighting. As I stated before, this is like the objectively like the most powerful and like the if you look at like number of seconds you have in your life, if your goal is to make positive change in the massive positive change in the United States, like this is, depending on what your skill sets are, this is probably like one of the biggest and best things you can put your effort toward.
Yeah, that's great. I really, because I think that's what everyone's craving. But it's been I feel like it's been so long since we've talked about this, or at least I feel like a lot of us have, because of COVID, the winter storm. We've been disconnected from politics for a while, I feel, especially like a lot of people after Trump left office. We were kind of like, it was like almost like just like a deep breath, and a lot of people just disconnected from it, and comedy's down. In a big way that I get my politics, I'll be honest, is through comedy. Like these comedian, a lot of the late night shows that a lot of people listen to, they're all comedians, right? That are like presenting you the news for the night. And, a lot of them are down, but now it's starting to pick back up. And yeah, I think people are still craving for that. We're like dying for change, because even now that Joe Biden's in there, it's like we haven't stopped fighting for the change. I feel like we can't just stop just because things have changed, and a lot of people.
Biden's not going to solve everything.
Exactly. And like presidential shifts and things like that don't change ground level effects and movements. What specifically can you do? Like, why are you going into Congress? And on a super basic level, what are your powers in Congress, and what can you do?
Not much. I just want to recognize the reality of this is why a lot of people don't run. They recognize it, especially right now. I mean, this has been the trend, and it's kind of completed, is the Senate Majority Leader and the Speaker of the House now have complete control of Congress, it's pretty much. Obviously, we've been seeing Schumer has been failing to rally the Democrats on some piece of legislation, but generally, that's what it has come down to, and that just has to do with Congress is able to write its own rules about how it governs itself and how it operates, and over time, it has just continued to move more and more and more power into the hands of the Speaker and the Senate Majority Leader, and in the last 5 years, there have been 0 votes on legislation introduced by freshman members of Congress. The year before that, it was a couple dozen. Before that, it was almost 100. Before that, it was hundreds. And it's this has just been a trend. This is bipartisan, by the way. This is from Paul Ryan and Pelosi both working toward this. Schumer and McConnell both working toward this. Of this centralization of power. And it really what it comes down to, a big way that they've done it is Nancy Pelosi raises more money than the whole rest of the Democratic caucus in the House combined. And so Pelosi can say, and McConnell, and Schumer are the same way in the Senate. Um, Pelosi can say, hey, well, if you just tag along with whatever I tell you, um, then if you get primaried, if you're getting primaried in your next race, I will dump a bunch of money into your race to make sure that you don't lose your seat. So just do whatever I say, and you'll be comfortable, cushy. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to work. You can keep your position. You can keep making all your money and all your connections in DC. And all you got to do is just vote yes when I tell you to vote yes. And again, like Kevin McCarthy, same way. Mitch McConnell, the same way. Chuck Schumer, the same way. And then now they have this like rule of like, I think it's actually in writing now that like they won't introduce any legislation that they don't like, that they're not 100% sure that they can like get passed. Like Pelosi just won't allow a vote for any legislation that's not 100% sure going to get passed, which is just ridiculous because now we can't get gauged on where our representatives stand. We don't have like official records. Like a lot of representatives go really out of the way to avoid putting their vote on record, because it can make them look bad, or like they have their own money interests, they're corporate masters, so like there's a lot of corruption in there. So like I fully recognize that I'm going to be limited in terms of my legislative powers in my first term. There are some interesting things that I want to try. I'm going to be pretty focused on universal basic income when I get there, but also like leveraging that platform to do a lot of things outside of just the legislative stuff. So talking about voting systems, and getting people hyped up about that. I want to create a system of a citizen-led system of government accountability, and just be the guinea pig to test that system. I want to have it show examples of directly addressing division outside of legislation, just within your own lives, by presenting examples of conversations. Like there's a lot of stuff I want to do outside of that, and having those kinds of things coming from an elected, federally elected official is really, really powerful. Because people talk about all this other stuff, but it doesn't come through. It gets ignored by the media. The messaging isn't there. Having that combination of it's coming from a congressperson and they're talking about all these things that like a congressperson never talks about, that's really, really powerful. And so I see an opportunity to be that voice. Again, I tend to just go on and on and on. So I'm going to
No, it's amazing. We need people that want to have voices. I've always kind of felt, against when I hear someone say they shouldn't use their platform to say whatever. No, they should. If you have a platform, maybe not everything you should go out there and rant and rave on, but when it's your time, when it's time to stand up and you have a platform, like it's great. And because without that platform, then what do we have, right? Like I think definitely like. I'm happy to see anyone be, motivated to do something good, right? Like that's just amazing. Like you can tell, like you went out enough to like Google electric cars and like find out about electric cars. Like, it's just certain type of people that are able to go out and just stay motivated to do things, right? And that's amazing. I feel like anything that's, you can tell you're coming from a positive place, and that like people, I'm amazed that people want to make positive change still day after day. There are a couple comments that we have here as well. If anyone out there wants to comment, throw me a comment, ask a question, we'll read them out as well. I like you, Brandon Raven, going on. What do you have? Anything else big? Anything else right now that that you want to rant and rave about while we're on that subject?
Oh boy. I'll give you a menu of options. You get to pick one.
Yeah.
So voting systems obviously is a huge. So I have 4 pillars of my platform. So voting systems is one of them. Universal basic income is another. Government accountability and directly addressing division. So
we were just going into universal basic income, and I think it's kind of, we're kind of basically there with COVID-19 bills, right? Like we have been getting, you can say that the feeling of getting money from the government is great. And I remember someone, I don't know if it was Andrew Yang, but it was around Andrew Yang when he was speaking about UBI. And I think it was him was mentioning how a lot of people don't trust our government. And a lot of people don't trust our government because we continuously are handing over our money and like giving our money to our government for taxes, for all these things. And it's like the day you get a check from the government, it doesn't matter how much it is. Even he was saying, it could be a very small amount, but the day you get a check from the government that's like, here's some money for you, this is from us, you're like immediately more susceptible, more able to trust that again, and to like go with that. And at a very basic level, I feel like that's an amazing thing, right? Like to have that trust back, to then have other things as well that can maybe repercussions because of that. But just having money in your pocket is like what Game Changer is for everybody. But let me know what UBI is, and the number one question I feel everyone always asks: how do you pay for it? Right? Where does the money come from? And I honestly I know about a few of it, and I feel like to me it's easy. Like the law, like it's actually better, right? Because corporations can't get around tax codes and things like that. So let us know about UBI and why it would actually work and where the money would come from.
Yeah, so first off, I want to address your initial thing about trust in the government. Like, you're right. A lot of people don't trust the federal government for a good reason. It's like it throw a lot of your money away.
For decades.
And so if there's one thing the U.S. federal government is good at doing, it's writing checks. It's really good at writing checks. And that could be, and writing checks to the people could be a really good, like, first thing the government can do to start earning the trust of the people back. And so, and this is like one of the things that one of the points that people bring up about universal health care is like, do you think our government's going to do healthcare well? I'm like, no, I don't think it's going to do it well at first. I think it's going to take time in speaking. It's complex. Healthcare is hard. We need to get there. But like, I totally get that like people don't trust it, which is why I think private industry should be allowed to remain if we do get universal healthcare. But again, it's like I always say, UBI is the first step. UBI is the first step. So what is UBI? Let's answer this question. Universal basic income or unconditional basic income. It goes by many names, minimum guaranteed income.
I've never heard
all sorts of different stuff.
Okay, good.
It's all the same thing. Is regular is some amount of cash given to you by the government, guaranteed, unconditional, on a regular basis, the same amount for everybody, no matter what, for the rest of your life. That's what it is. So Andrew Yang's version of UBI that he called the Freedom Dividend, was $1,000 a month to every adult American citizen, free and clear for the rest of your life.
Is that crazy?
That was his version. What?
Is that crazy? $1,000 a month? Why is that not crazy?
It's not crazy because it makes way more sense than any of our current welfare programs. It makes way more sense than so many other things that we do. Universal basic income is one of the most sensible things in the 21st century that we can do right now. It makes sense when you think about the lack of progress that we've made on anything in the last 40 plus years. It's because that final roadblock of UBI, it's like that's the thing that we need to do that's going to unlock the ability to make progress on anything else. Everything else has roadblocks, and universal basic income will knock down at least one roadblock to every single problem we've been failing to solve for the last 40 plus years. And to really like dig into it, there are so many different angles on this. There are a lot of different ways to look at this. In the United States runs on money. I think we can agree on that, right? Whether or not you like that, you think it's a good thing, is irrelevant. But that's our reality right now. And so, one really important thing here is that there's this concept of scarcity mentality that happens when you're not secure in your basic needs. Housing, food, safety, health, right? These kind of basic necessities that we need to live. If you are not secure in that, your brain switches. into survival mode, into I just need to do what I need to do to survive. And that we have limited mental capacity as human beings. We have big brains compared to other animals, but they're still finite. There's only so much room in there. And when all of your thoughts are taken up, all of your time is taken up by having to worry about securing your basic needs, you're not able to do anything else. You're not able to think about other things. You're not able to plan for the future. You're not able to be productive or stay motivated or care for yourself or care for others. You can't do any of these things. And so because we live in a country that runs on money, if you just give people enough money to secure their basic needs, you can pull a lot of people out of that scarcity mentality, out of poverty. I don't like this kind of arbitrary number that they place on poverty, like what, $12,400 a year or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
To me, poverty is that scarcity mentality. And so, in my mind, that makes almost everybody in the country in poverty, like, right? And it's like, because a lot of people in the country right now are not secure in their basic needs. Over 90% of new jobs are temporary gig or contract work. And so if you can help people secure their basic needs, they'll become more productive. And UBI is a really simple, powerful, hundreds of millions scale solution to that problem. And so I forgot the question now.
Yeah, no,
no.
no.
What was it?
I think that still, like, what people want to hear is like, how do we pay for it? How do we pay for it, right? Because until they hear that, this right here is like, I don't what, you know what I mean? That, and then once they hear that, they're like, it's easy. And then on top of that, like, so how's it paid for, right? But then the way it's paid for, there's two things it does, right? Because like the value added tax, like it makes corporations pay for these things up front at the point of sale. Right, so they don't get to like dump things throughout the year. They don't get to dump their inventory throughout the year, and then it's paid from these corporations. So it's not like it's a tax. Like, anyways, yeah. You tell us, let us know.
Yeah. So how do we pay for UBI?
Yeah.
So first things first is we need to decide how much. So Andrew Yang proposed $1,000 a month. That made sense in 2019. 2019 was like 50 years ago. That was a long time ago.
Yeah.
So I am fighting for $2,000 a month for two reasons. One, it's post COVID-19. So it's like COVID-19 really changed the world in a lot of ways. We experienced 10 years of change in 10 months, kind of thing. Number two, the second reason I'm fighting for $2,000 a month is because we live in the real world and we don't get everything we ask for. I'm going to have to fight people on the floor, and I'm going to have to go to negotiations. And like 2,000 would be great. I'd also be happy with 1,700. That'd be fantastic.
Sure.
I'd totally vote for 1,700 a month. Like that'd be fantastic.
Sure.
So given that, my version of the freedom dividend, and I am calling it the freedom dividend, I'm just stealing it from Andrew Yang.
Mm-hmm.
So it starts with the value added tax, VAT, of VAT. So that's a type of transactional tax that's used in over 150 countries around the world. Why is it used in so many countries? Because it works.
It works. Yeah.
Right? Like that's the reason. We have income taxes here. We have these corporate taxes. We have all this stuff that don't work. Companies are able to wriggle their way out of paying them. I mean, how much does Amazon pay in taxes every year? $0 and 0 cents.
Yeah.
And that's totally normal. They are the rule, not the exception. The effective tax rate, income tax rate for the wealthiest 10% is now like lower than the next bracket down, because they're all able to just, they don't make their money on income anymore. Their wealth generates more wealth, and there's no taxes on carry means and capital interest and all this other stuff. And it's all like confusing and gross. But you want to know what tax everybody pays that is always consistently paid? Your sales tax.
Sales tax, yeah.
When the hell do you get around a sales tax?
Yeah.
You never get around a sales tax. You pay it every time.
Yeah.
Why? Because it's a transactional tax. It's a consumption tax. It's that simplicity is really, really powerful. But here's the problem. The sales tax does not apply to most business-to-business transactions in the U.S.
It's applied to the consumer.
So it's only applied to the consumer.
Exactly.
And it's not applied to all these business-to-business transactions. So a value-added tax hits all of these business-to-business transactions as well, all transactions. Now, real quick, just want to say we would exempt staple goods like food and diapers, and we can crank it up on luxury goods.
But
like,
there would still be sales tax.
Buy a mega yacht or helicopter. What?
But there would still be sales tax, unlike other taxes. Like we'd
sales tax is a state level thing.
And yeah, like,
that's up to your state. There are states that don't have sales tax.
Sure.
Sales tax.
But like other things would still stay consistent. Like the other things would still work hand in hand with this as well. This would just be the specific like tax change of the value added tax and things like that.
Yeah, and so the value added tax, the percentage that I'm proposing for my plan is 20%, which is about equivalent to what they use in the European Union. So 20%. I know that feels high, but the thing you have to remember. You're bringing in an extra $2,000 every month, free and clear. You get that money, $2,000 every single month. The prices of the things that you buy go up maybe 20, 30%, but you're bringing in, but your income may be double from that, depending, or maybe even more, depending on how much income you're currently making or where it's coming from or wherever. And that doesn't even apply to staple goods. So if you're not buying extra crap, if you're only buying staple goods and services, then you're going to see very little, if no change to the prices and things that you're buying, but you still get this extra $2,000 a month.
Yeah, and on that note, real quick, and the prices going up, because I hear that a lot too. We hear that a lot. Do prices actually go up, or do some prices go up? Because like there still is supply and demand, right? So like you would still have, competition, in some cases. So like would prices go up? I mean, I feel like maybe that is subjective across different areas, or is that just something because there's just more money in circulation, prices are going to go up all the way around?
Money in circulation is kind of an interesting term here, but it will go up in some sectors more than others.
Right, like demand.
So for companies that sell things like that are like middlemen kind of things, they're resellers, and they're selling products that aren't well verticalized, so they're being shipped all over the world. They have these really extensive and complex supply chains. It's being passed from company to company to company to being built. Those prices will probably go up more. But for companies that are well verticalized, for companies that have good management, companies that sell their own products, for companies that sell staple goods, those prices are not going to increase dramatically, especially because if you talk to like a supply chain manager, they'll tell you that like they consider that when the VATs in other countries and the taxes and everything when they're deciding like the processes and the manufacturing that they're going to go through, and they streamline things in different ways to optimize for taxes in different countries and as things move about the economy. And so like companies will find ways to become more efficient. This isn't going to be completely passed on to the consumer. Companies will shift the way that they do things in order to reduce that. So this will influence company operations as well.
Yeah.
So some things, prices are going to go up, and others not so much. But also addressing this like money in circulation thing. So this is we're not printing any money to do this. We are taking money that already exists in the economy that is not currently flowing through the hands of regular consumers.
Sure.
And we're putting it into the hands of the consumers, and we're increasing that cyclical flow. So where is this money? This money is locked up in the upper echelon of these mega corporations, particularly these tech corporations, your Googles, your Facebooks, your Amazons, all your marketing firms that are just buying and selling yours and my data and info back and forth and for ads and all this stuff. And it's all happening on these servers. It's not actually producing anything. It's all just these ones and zeros floating around. It's not making stuff. It's not flowing through our communities. It's just, it's trillions of dollars that are just kind of stuck up there in this upper echelon. And so by taking a slice off of every transaction, every Facebook ad, every Google search, every robot truck mile, eventually every Amazon purchase, that's about $1.5 trillion in new revenue that's gonna flow from this kind of like locked up, not doing anything money that's not actually producing anything down into the hands of consumers. And what are consumers gonna do with that money? They're gonna spend it, right? And
Yeah,
like this is economics 101.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're gonna spend more.
We
yeah,
spend
they're
a
gonna
lot
spend
more
that.
than
Yeah.
like, the corporations or like richer people. Everyone else, we spend more in our cities, and we spend more
they're
around
going to be
town.
spending it in their communities,
Exactly.
at local restaurants,
Exactly.
at local businesses, to sign up for their kid to play baseball. They're gonna spend it. Maybe it'll go into schools or something, or whatever it is. Like it could go into a whole variety of things. Starting small businesses, entrepreneurship will skyrocket. Entrepreneurship has been on a decline for decades because people are secure enough. They don't have the capital. They don't know that they're going to be able to buy food and pay rent and do all this stuff while they're starting up their business. If they have a basic income to stand on, they're going to start a lot of small businesses. And so this basic income is going to start flowing through communities in effective ways that actually produce things, right? It's the flow of money that makes an economy healthy. This is economics 101. Any economist will tell you this. Over time, some of this money is going to trickle back up to your Amazons and your Googles and your Facebook, as it has been for decades. Well, I guess, yeah. And that's still going to happen. But then you take those slices off those transactions up there again anyway with the VAT, and you bring it back down. And so the VAT plus UBI is just creating this, it's just this circular flow of money through the economy. And that too, that increase in economic activity is going to generate even more revenue in more VAT taxes, in more income taxes, in more all of this stuff. Just increased economic activity is also going to produce more quote unquote revenue for the government. That again just goes back into the universal basic income. This actually almost doubles what you initially get. So between tackling on the VAT and then the increased economic activity from the UBI, that's about $3 trillion right there. We're literally talking about doubling the budget, the U.S. federal budget. So that's a ton. Now there are some other things. This isn't quite enough money to handle this program, but I just want to pause and let you respond. What do you got from today?
I want this to happen. I guess like it does seem to be a one-party kind of a thing, right? Like it does seem to be only like on the progressive Democratic side. Like, what are the roadblocks? Like, why is it not hard? Do we think that this is going to get passed in the future sometime, like soon? Like, do we think that this is something that is like starting to make ground? Because I know we're talking about it mainstream where we never even talked about it before. So what do you think? Do you think this is something that could actually happen soon? I mean, I know.
This isn't.
Go ahead.
UBI is a supermajority issue now, thanks in part to Andrew Yang and the pandemic. It's kind of twofold, and that's on all sides. Even among Republicans, it's a majority issue. Republicans want this because it provides independence. They'd rather have the money themselves than have the government spending it. It makes sense. This isn't a partisan thing. It doesn't fall under any single ideology. This is we almost got a UBI back in the early 70s. We were super close. It actually got turned down in Congress because it wasn't high enough. It's considered, some representatives consider it to be the biggest failure of Congress was turning down the UBI program because they wanted it to be a higher amount.
Wow.
And it's like they should have just taken what they had. Yeah. So we've needed this for a long time.
Yeah.
And so like the popularity is already there. Of course, we run into the core problems of like, how do we get it done? Which is where every conversation comes back to. It comes back to, well, legalizing weed is a super majority issue, but it still hasn't happened nationwide yet. right? Like
Mm-hmm.
universal healthcare is a super majority issue nationwide still. And health, I mean, you can come up with a dozen different things that are super majority issues nationwide that haven't happened, and it's because our representatives' incentives are not aligned with the people, and we'll get into more of why that. Um, you know, definitely like people, like you were saying earlier, people getting that taste of like seeing that direct deposit, getting that check from the government. That's like that's why the government, that's why Congress didn't want to do it in the first place. They were afraid that people were going to get a taste of that and that they
Yeah.
were going to start demanding more, which of course is the solution. But what UBI does is it empowers people generally, and if you're empowering people, it's harder to stay in power. It's harder to keep power over them,
Sure.
especially in the disgusting ways that a lot of government, especially federal government officials do.
Sure.
So yeah, it's kind of this long game play. But
And
go ahead.
one question we had from Robert, and this goes perfectly right now too, is so let's say UBI gets passed or whatnot. What the next a lot of people or you may say about it is you're saying it empowers people. There's the other side that say, well, it's gonna make people lazy. And honestly, like I do not believe that, because I'm that person where I'm like, for so long in my life, like I started working when I was 16 years old. I've had a job forever. I've worked super hard. I'm lucky that I kind of have a little bit of saving and can do things and invest and now but I'm still kind of struggling day to day. Now after COVID, I don't have a day job. I'm just a photographer now. I'm on my own. I have pay taxes now. I used to always get taxes from a W-2. Now it's like, I know for a fact, like, how much stress would just, how many things would just change if I knew that I would just have, like, basic necessities. Like, not even all of the basic necessities, just enough to where, like, I could have a month or two to breathe and, like, focus on my future, right? Or do something to go out and to get a better job and those kind of things. And like it was always like I never had that chance when I was younger. I just had to go get a job real quick and make my bills, right, and like pay for my rent and things like that. So I know personally that it could even be a small amount at first or something and move forward, and I would be totally on it, and it wouldn't make me any lazier. I'm not gonna like stay home because I still need all of the other income that I have to feel like I'm really productive. So I get Robert's question is there a responsibility? Do people need, like, is there something that people need to do in order to like get this UBI? And why would people stay productive? Why do you think people would stay productive as well?
Yeah, I want to answer this question. So this is a question we get all the time. So I'm going to share my screen actually for a moment here. Okay, you see this poster?
Mm-hmm.
See that question at the top? I always like to start with this question before I start talking to people about UBI.
Yeah.
If you received a check for $2,000 today, what would you do with that money? What I did is, as I went out and I did a little thing, I was outside all day long, and I went through 5 of these poster boards where I just asked random passersby this question, and they got to write down their answer, and didn't even talk about UBI until they finished writing down their answer.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to take a look through some of these. Take my boyfriend on a trip to Europe. Invest in stock market and business. Save. Invest in continued learning. Pay off my car. Down payment on a new apartment. Go where I'm supposed to be in California. Donate to someone else in need. Go back to school. Invest in my business and take my mom to a fine ass dinner. Invest. Pay bills. Give money. Help family. Take a trip to Puerto Rico. Stock. Pay bills and help my twins. Hire a financial advisor. Pay my phone bill. Help the kids. Put it in the bank and save up. Save up. Pay my bills. Get off the streets and help the needy. Close the camps, no kids in cages, help someone need it, invest it. Right. So like,
yeah,
nobody on here said I'm gonna quit my job.
Yeah.
And even if it was every month, like we have, I'm gonna stop sharing. We have a lot of evidence showing that UBI does not cause people to quit their job for all the same reasons that you have stated,
Mm-hmm.
which is work is an intrinsic part of the human condition. People want to work. And when you remove that scarcity mentality from people, they actually become more productive. And that's what all of the UBI studies done across the world have shown us and demonstrated. This is from California to Kenya. Increases in economic activity, increases in entrepreneurship, people getting full-time work in careers with benefits rather than part-time work, because they're more secure and have more time to look for the job that they need instead of having to take the job they have to take.
Exactly. And
our current
Or
Go ahead.
That actually is like a really good point, because in the back of my mind, that's what I was thinking, was that there are some jobs that it's okay to quit. Maybe some people should quit. Like, they've been wanting to quit for a long time and they just couldn't. And that's not the best job for them. They could definitely be having a better job. You know, if they had that extra, couple months to prepare, or like do a test or whatever, and like get a certification. Yeah. So, I was just thinking that's like another reason why there would be a shift in different jobs, and that would open up all those jobs, because sometimes, like, it's not always a bad thing for someone to quit a job, because I hear that as well, right? And then they could, like you were saying, they could go out and pursue something better, and that would be an entire huge shift of new jobs that could be filled, and other jobs, and just revolving of jobs.
And let's take a look at this lingo for a moment, because I see a difference between work and a job.
A career.
So right now, we're stuck in this 20th century mindset of like jobs are the solution to everything. But jobs are just this kind of like narrow slice of labor. They're not actually representative of all the different work that we do that contributes to our communities and to our society and makes people's lives better.
Yeah, totally.
So, right, raising children, that's work.
Yeah.
No parent is going to tell you that raising their kids isn't work.
Yeah.
That's really important work.
Yeah.
And we don't pay anybody for it.
Yeah.
Right? Taking care of sick or elderly family members. A lot of people don't realize just how many Americans were already isolating at home long before the pandemic, because they're either disabled, they're unable to get a job, or they're staying at home taking care of a family member, sick or elderly family member who can't work. I mean, half the country, that's the number. Half the country does not work for a wage. Damn near everybody works, but half the country does not work for a wage. That was before the pandemic. But damn near everybody works, right? Volunteering, freelance work, artistry. This is all important stuff that contributes. It's important work, but we don't recognize it. We don't pay for it because our thinking is so narrow-minded. And here's the thing. I always like to put on the qualifier of in the United States right now. I don't care about whether or not this made sense 100 years ago. I don't care. I care about what makes sense today.
Sure.
And in the 21st century,
And
the information. Yeah, we've got all this automation, we've got all these robots, this AI and the computers and everything that can do all of this labor for us. And right now, it's making our lives worse. Why are robots making our lives worse? Robots should be making our lives better, right? UBI is a great first step in helping to change the system and make the shift, so that way we can allow robots to do the labor that nobody wants to do, and let people decide what they want to do with their time and what they think is valuable work for them. And think about you were talking about opening up jobs. Maybe people will leave jobs that don't need to be done.
That was my point. Yeah. That was my point. Like, I worked for a furniture company for a long time, and I really loved the company. I loved my boss. I loved everything about it. But it was hard work. It was backbreaking work. I still probably have, like, issues, bodily issues, sciatic nerve issues that are, like, because of this job that I did for so long. And, if I had UBI, it probably would have been more than enough to easily have not had to wait for a pandemic to completely shift my lifestyle for me to say like, okay, I'm just doing it now because that's exactly what happened. So
Yeah.
so
Yeah, that's what I'm doing too.
do it.
But yeah, but like, this is going, like I said, it empowers people. UBI empowers people,
Yeah.
and this is going to give bargaining power to people working these crappy dead end jobs. It's like that's like this like labor that could totally be done by machines, but it's not because the people working them don't have bargaining power. I want automation to increase. I want more robots doing crap that people don't want to do. And so UBI is a path toward that future.
Yeah,
This
it's gonna happen
UBI.
either way.
What?
Like the robot's gonna happen either way. It's hard to say that.
Robots
it's
are gonna happen
not,
either way,
so,
but like I'm saying,
yeah.
a lot of people are trying to fight against that to like keep jobs.
Sure.
But like, why are you asking for nicer chains? Fight for freedom.
That's a great
I
way
want
to
the
put it.
robots doing this crap that nobody wants to do.
Yeah.
Stop. I don't want people to be slaves to this ridiculous labor that people don't need to spend their time doing anymore. And so I want to move toward a better future. Now, you had asked another question about what do you have to do to get this. So I call it unconditional.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to give it to every adult who lives in America. Don't care if you're a resident, don't care if you're legal, got your documentation papers, whatever. That's not legally viable. That's not going to pass Congress. If I'm wrong, and it seems like I can't, great.
Well, there are 2 examples already in America where there is a form of UBI already, right? There's Alaska that has done it, which is different because it kind of goes more through the oil, the surplus of oil or whatnot, and they needed people to go up there. But it's a form of UBI.
It's a form of UBI, yes.
And I don't know what the other one is, but I've heard that there are 2 other forms of UBI in America. But
I mean, there have been some trials, but nothing like proper.
But definitely in Alaska, if you move to Alaska and you live there, you get, I forget what it is, $400 a month.
It's between $1,000 and $2,000 a year.
Yeah.
And it's an oil dividend is what it gets, is what it is. And so yeah, so that's the form, and they love it there. They absolutely love it. And so yeah, it's like this is one thing Andrew Yang always used to say is, what is the oil of the 21st century?
Data.
Yeah. I want my data dividend. I want my data check. And so it's like these companies are taking all my data, but they're not giving me anything in return. So like I want my data dividend. And I also just I also see the freedom dividend as just like, this is your dividend for being invested in this country. That's the way that I like it. That I like to look at it. It's like it's already your money, but Amazon and Facebook and Google are keeping it from you. So like this program goes and takes it from them and gives it to you, but it's already yours. It's just being held from you. But yeah, I wanted what was the question I was about to answer? Oh yeah, getting it. So unconditional. Likely in order to get it passed, you would have to be an American citizen. You got to be at least 18 years old. You can't be incarcerated. You actually still would be getting it while you're incarcerated, but it wouldn't be like it wouldn't go into like your bank account. That money is going toward sustaining you while you're in jail. So then when you come out of jail or prison, then you get that first check. You just get one check. So that's kind of how that works out. And there's one other thing too, which is if you're getting non-earned income from federal government programs, you can either keep those or you can give them up and get the UBI. It's an opt-in program, so you have to opt in to get it. But so right now there's a problem with our welfare state, our welfare programs in the United States, which is that they are conditional. That is like the crux of it. That is the thing here that causes a problem, because these programs, people are relying on these programs for survival, right? They are relying on it to make sure that they can pay the rent, that they can eat, that they can become healthy or whatever. And these programs being conditional, those conditions become incentives when it's required for you to live. Well, you're going to do whatever it takes to keep that because you don't want to die, right? Thousands of people die on the streets in America every single year, right? It's like, it's a death sentence if you don't jump through the hoops. And so the conditional nature of our current welfare state incentivizes people to behave in really strange ways. For example, unemployment insurance is literally paying people to stay unemployed. Why would you pay people to stay unemployed? Right? So this basic income, you get it whether you're employed or not.
Yeah.
Any money you make on top of it, that's yours. You don't lose the basic income at all. And so by removing the condition, you're removing all the incentives, and you're removing the incentive to behave in strange ways. And so the unconditionality of it is incredibly important. The moment you means test it, the moment you put conditions on it,
sure,
the whole thing breaks, and it just becomes another broken, dehumanizing, like inefficient, bureaucratic BS welfare program. We don't need any more of those in the country.
Yeah.
What we need is an unconditional basic income that gives people the freedom to make their own decisions about their own lives and do what they want to do, and instead of enslaving them under this incredibly bureaucratic system. So that's what it is. It's freedom.
Yeah, and it seems like there's no downside. It really seems like once people kind of learn about it, and they learn about like where it comes from, like you were saying, and all of these things, then there's no. It seems like this has to happen soon. Like it has to be something that is catching steam, because to me there doesn't seem like there's any downside, and the economic boom from this would be crazy. I wonder if, going back to Tesla and electric cars, I wonder if that will be something that like happens once we see the Tesla Semi, or once we see full self-driving. I know full self-driving, that's a big news right now. Elon Musk was saying that anyone that has purchased full self-driving can now get the full self-driving beta. So you'll be able to go in the car, and the next time it hits Wi-Fi, you can download the next beta version, and it'll be the full self-driving, and there's a little still vetting and things like that, right? But it's like still another step very much closer to full self-driving. So like I wonder if that's something that we'll see roll out more. We'll talk, like the media will talk about it more, the news will talk about it more, and then maybe we'll see something. But like correlation to, I think, the Semi, because a lot of people talk about that with like truck drivers, and like the robots are taking our jobs and those kind of things revolving around the trucking industry.
Yeah. Truck driving is the most common job in 29 U.S. states.
Wow.
You bring trucks that drive themselves to the market, or disrupting the most common job in America.
Yeah.
Like you are just replacing it with a robot. Like it's. We got to do we have to be ready for this.
Yeah.
And we're not ready for it. But
Yeah.
a universal basic income is something that we can do immediately. We can get that. I mean, you can sign into the law, and you can have checks going out, a month or two after that. Like it can happen so fast compared to any other ideas that people have had.
Sure.
Why? Because the government can just write checks to people.
Yeah.
Now we've been doing it through the IRS, but that's more of an emergency measure. You would want to establish a new what's the word, like a new government like program administration, a new administration just for this program.
Sure.
But the idea is like you can get money to people pretty quick, whereas like setting up like the logistics of setting up other types of infrastructure is really, really hard.
Yeah, like a lot of the comments that I keep getting are about healthcare. And Luso Saylor said healthcare coverage and free education is one thing in Europe that you use to example. And then another, healthcare has to be healthcare has most Americans financially crippled. And it's like, well, you wouldn't have to change the healthcare system. If you had UBI, people would have that money in their pocket, and at least for now, they could do
some people
they could do the immediate needs, and they would have their immediate emergency needs, like to at least a start. And also the feeling of, like we said before, now you feel comfortable with the government as well, right? Because you're getting money from them. That could even persuade more people to be okay with a universal healthcare system.
Healthcare.
Yeah, and it could like just trickle down the line. to allow for more
Yeah.
more push in that direction.
Yeah, and you know, a really important part of the freedom dividend program is the ability to protect your freedom dividend. And there are a variety of mechanisms for this. Kind of the one that I came up with that I think is just like, and this is optional. Not everybody needs to do this. It's like when you opt in, you can decide how you're going to get your freedom dividend money. You can have it deposited directly into a personal checking savings account. You can get a physical check, or you can have it. I want to form a third type of personal bank account. We can call it the freedom account. The name is not really important, but it's incredibly restricted. There's only one way for money to go into the account, and that is through the freedom dividend program. There are only two ways to get money out of the account. You either transfer it from that account into another account that you personally have with that same bank, or you withdraw it as cash. And that's it. So no creditors can go after you.
Oh, okay.
No
Okay.
like loans. Like nobody else can take this money from you. It is your money. Nobody can take it from you. So if the hospital, if creditors are coming after you for hospital bills or whatever, they can't go into that account and take that money. That is your money. And like if you are in a position where like you can't even put it into a checking account, then you can just withdraw it as cash, and you can just pay for things with cash. And like that's protected. They can't take that from you. They can't steal your cash from you. And so like this is an option for people who are in those situations. It's also really powerful for survivors of domestic abuse, to be able to have that money split off, knowing that they'll be able to have it and that their abuser won't be able to take it, or at least it'll be a lot harder for their abuser to take that money from them. And so it'll be really easy, and it'll actually be really easy to switch to the freedom account. To switch off of the freedom account will be really hard, intentionally, like because we don't want survivors of domestic abuse to have the person abusing them say, well, switch off of the freedom account and have your money go into our quote unquote joint account or whatever. It's like, that's a really hard thing to do. It's a process that's going to take months and months and months. Like it should be really hard to get off of it in order to protect those people. And so like if you're adamant and you're in a better place and you don't have creditors coming after you, you just want to get off of it, you'll still be able to do it. But that will be intentional. It's like once you've chosen to go into that kind of more lockdown freedom account, the point is that it is very locked down in order to help protect your freedom dividend, because it needs to be for you. It's for you. It's your freedom dividend and nobody else's. Mm-hmm. And so that's a way to help protect people, and ensure that they can cover their basic needs should they have gotten cancer and these huge bankrupting bills, which of course is awful. And I still want to get on a universal health care to help deal with that too. But this is like an immediate thing that we can do right now to start addressing that, whereas healthcare is a lot tougher of a problem. So I still believe in universal healthcare. Like I said, universal healthcare, education, these actually fall under this umbrella term of universal basic services. That also includes public transportation. It includes childcare, includes legal counsel. And universal basic income and universal basic services have a multiplying effect. You get both of them in your society, and you start to see massive positive change. Totally. So having universal basic income, universal quality healthcare at kind of the top of your list is actually like a really great two things to have at the top of your list, because they have a multiplying effect together.
Yeah, I agree. And on your previous point, I feel like that what you were saying, I didn't even think about that aspect of how like you get it no matter what, and it's hard not to get it, because you get it no matter what. Like creditors can't take it away from you, because I think one of the
child support can't take it away from you either.
I think one of the COVID bills, I didn't get one of the $600 ones because something just changed on my taxes or something, you know.
So, really stupid. It was that. It's like, just give people the money, and if you really want to claw some of it back through taxes, you can. But like, you should have just given the money out and said, you may get back taxed on this in the future, depending on whatever. Which I think is also stupid. $600 is not a lot of money. We've given way more on other things. We should have just given it to people outright. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, the U.S. government owes every single adult in this country a check for $20,000. Like, no joke, just straight up. People are in so much debt right now. Like, there's just so many. Like, but that's a whole that's a whole. I don't want to get into the
Yeah.
past right now because
Sure.
it just makes me mad.
Someone
It makes me
someone
really
did comment, like printing money's not always the answer. And on the freedom dividend side, we're like, well, that's not printing money.
a perpetual universal basic income. But
Yeah.
I will say that printing money is not always the answer, but it's not
But
always
some
not the
kind
answer.
can help for sure.
And what we saw in this pandemic, especially initially, is a deflation spiral. So it's the opposite of inflation. Prices started going down. Some people will say that it didn't happen because a lot of staple goods didn't drop in price very much. That's because grocery stores were like the only thing that was still open. Prices on a whole bunch of other things did plummet. And so that's still deflation, a deflationary spiral. And so in that situation, printing money and injecting it into the economy is actually a really great way to help keep the economy afloat. Everything in moderation, but trillions and trillions of dollars. I mean, we need trillions and trillions more. And there's actually this concept that we don't really talk about that much in economics. It's actually really important, called capacity utilization. So capacity utilization is the full amount of capacity, goods and services that are being created that can be bought. And the utilization part is how much of that are we actually buying? How much of it are we using? So amount of stuff available to buy, what percentage of that are we actually buying? And in the United States, since we started measuring it in the 60s, it's been on a steady, it was in kind of the 90% range, mid 90% range. And ever since then, it's been on a steady decline with spikes downwards. In 2008 and in 2020, it got to as low as 65% last April. And right now we're hovering at about 75%. And what this means, capacity utilization, it depends on why it's low. If it's low because people are afraid to spend money, then printing more money is actually not what you want to cause inflation. But if the reason that people aren't spending money is because they don't have money to spend, then printing money and giving it to people will not cause inflation until that capacity utilization is closer to 100%.
Sure.
And so we actually have a huge buffer right now to work with. And you could even say, and I've considered a capacity utilization clause in my Freedom Dividend program, where if capacity utilization drops below, say, I don't know, 90%, it's kind of an arbitrary number. I'd want to talk to some knowledgeable economists to get a better number. Then you cut the VAT in half. So you cut it from 20% down to 10%. And then you make up the difference by printing money until the capacity utilization is back up above, say, 95%. Again, I don't know if that's exactly the right number, but something like that. And then you bring the VAT back up to where it normally is. And that helps to keep the economy stabilized. And you can also lock the universal basic income to inflation. Inflation happens naturally over time. Even if the government doesn't print any money at all, you can still get inflation because banks print money. And digitally, they loan out more money than what they currently have. This is how banks have operated for basically forever. And so that alone is going to cause inflation in your economy. And so there's always going to be inflation. You can lock UBI to the inflation, so over time it goes up with it. So as the prices of staple goods go up, as everything else goes up, this $2,000 does not diminish, doesn't turn into a zero effect. And that is, I want to be very clear, that is not going to create an inflationary spiral.
Yeah,
that is not going to create hyperinflation. It's not a feedback loop. That's not how that works.
Yeah, and I've heard this just recently talk. I forget who it was. I wish I could shout out their name, but deflation also happens in a technological term as well. Deflation can also happen in, for example, you used to go out and buy a TV and it would be $2,000 for an HD TV, and then boom, now you can go buy it $200, same TV, right?
Yeah.
And so but at some point it was the opposite. A long time ago, you could get only a color TV, and it was that old school color TV in the box, and it was probably really expensive back in the 60s or 70s compared to how much money people had at the time. Like, that technology was so deflation and inflation, is another thing that like we talk about that has a broad, there are many different things, and it's like, do we have the things that, do we have the products already? Do the consumers already have the products that are inflating, or do consumers have the products or need to buy the products that are inflating or that aren't inflating? Does that make sense? Like, if everyone already has all of the products that they need, but like, let's say they're the necessity products, milk or food or like, staple goods, those are inflating, then that's not good compared to like, but like, that's just another topic that I feel is interesting because not everything inflates at the same time. But like, I guess what you were saying is that you want to control the rate of mainly inflation to like cost of living, inflation to staple goods,
cost of staple goods. Yeah, that's how inflation is typically measured. Now,
exactly.
U.S. government has been like, there's an argument that the U.S. government has been intentionally understating what inflation has been, and I need to look more into that.
Yeah.
But I talked to somebody about that.
Pretty interesting.
Who was like, because of like these like certain programs that are tied to inflation that they don't want to have to spend more money on, and so they're intentionally reporting inflation as being less than what it actually is in reality in order to reduce the cost. It's like, I don't know how true that is. I have to look into it some more. But like, so there's also this issue, like this is something I would want to address in the UBI of like rewriting how the U.S. government calculates inflation to ensure that it's actually being done in like a sensible, correct way. And calculating inflation is also difficult. Inflation is tied to your staple goods and your cost of living. That's what real inflation is, because like you said, increases in productivity that reduce the prices of like technology and other things affect things too. But again, that comes back around to like the need for UBI as productivity is skyrocketing now, right? It's like year over year, it's just going up and up and up and up and up, more so than it did the year before. It's like, okay, we are now hitting this inflection point of like, we can no longer try to think about like, oh, new jobs to invent. Like, we're like, even the service sector is going to be replaced, right? Even like creative sectors, like New York Times and other like newspapers, like they use AIs that write articles, right? Like instead of having people do it, right? I've talked to software developers who are like, I talked to one who was like, my day job is to write this program that replaces realtors, and it's already better than realtors, and we are able to be 10 times more efficient in terms of money than real life realtors. And over the next 3 years, we're going to replace every realtor in the country with this software, and we have so much momentum already, and the software is getting really, really good, right? It's like, this is, every single sector is being threatened by automation, and it's like, so we need to move on from this labor idea into this, just let people do what they want to do instead of forcing them to do things that need to be done that can instead be done by machines.
And definitely a lot more jobs would be created when people have that ability to go out and create more jobs and create businesses.
Yeah, but like, I want to leave this word job in the past. And you see, there's 3 words here. There's job, there's labor, and there's work. Of those 3, the word work to me seems to be kind of the broadest of the 3. And so work and job are kind of, they're mostly pretty intertwined. And I want to separate them. And I want to leave jobs and labor in the past. That's, labor is for machines, life is for people, right? And let work become much more and more and more this like thing that you decide to spend your time on. And that's what work is.
Yeah.
And so I want to try to, you can never force the language, and there's no such, linguistics, it happens, language evolves on its own. But this is I think the trend that we're going to see with these words and how they're going to evolve, and kind of the way that I want to push them.
Yeah, totally. And I speak that way with my kid too, because he's always like, what are you doing in there? What are you doing in the office? I'm like, I'm working. I could just be on the computer doing anything, but I'm working. I'm working.
Right.
And we do use it. All right, let's change it up. let's see. I know that. Let's see. Current news here. I spoke to you a little bit earlier. We kind of spoke a little bit about one of the things in the COVID bill was there was a Chuck Schumer. They were speaking about the electric car thing. He wants to replace every gas car in America with electric cars, which is basically like a form of cash for clunkers. And Joe Biden he's said many times, I think in the debates, he mentioned that he wanted to do 50,000 electric charging stations. And I feel like just the charging stations alone and infrastructure, I feel like this is time. I feel like this is it. I've been ranting and raving about this for a long time. Like, even before Biden got elected, I was like, there's going to be a time in the near future where we're finally going to get an infrastructure bill. And that infrastructure bill is going to be focused around charging stations. And the reason why I think it's going to do that, and it seems that it is because it's not a wind turbine, it's not solar, it's not giving money to fossil fuels. It's like right in the middle, or like it's helping and fueling like the whole electric car industry. It's almost like the electric cars, they're not going to be sold unless people feel comfortable with charging them and all that. So I just think this is great.
Gas station on every corner.
Gas station on every corner. Yeah, we need a charging station on every corner. 50,000 is honestly not enough. And I noticed that, like, I want to say it's actually...
charging station in every gas station.
There should be, right? Like, could there be an incentive that could come out to say, like, every gas station has to have at least one charging station? I mean, anything could happen.
You can make a regulation that says that for every gas pump at a gas station, or for every, 3 gas pumps at a gas station, there needs to be at least one high-speed electric vehicle charger or something. Like, you can make that a regulation. You can say every gas station has, every gas station company has 3 years to make this happen. You could just write that into law. It's not going to happen, but you could.
Sure.
And there's gonna, you're gonna have to replace some transformers. Like, there's some other like deeper infrastructure that needs to happen. But you can make that, or you can do economic incentives. But I'm so passionate about the environment that I would just want to make that a regulation. But I'll settle for an economic incentive if that's, if it's between that and not passing, I guess. But I think it should be just like a regulation.
Yeah, it says here Schumer would deploy $45 billion in grants to upgrade the nation's charging infrastructure and $17 billion to encourage manufacturers to retrofit their facilities to EV production. Which, of course, is like still kind of like incentivizing them to transition. Which I feel is good. I honestly, I don't want the other ones to go out because I want Tesla to have competition. I honestly don't want GM to fail, even though I have spoken about that before. It's there definitely a real possibility that GM and Ford could fail in the near future if they don't transition, and especially because Ford doesn't really make much money on any of their vehicles except for like the Ford pickup trucks, which is why the Cybertruck is so like important, because that electric truck market, like a lot of these companies, that's where their profits come from. So it's hard to see, and they keep shutting down all these factories here in America, and like I feel like they're kind of like constraining down and like getting ready to build that like just one EV factory or whatever, like when the time is ready. But I'm just so enthused to see this. This came out like 2 days ago. I guess it says that he's signed it is an executive order to replace the government's fleet as well for 650,000 vehicles to be all electric. So that's interesting. Like if we see like post, I guess that's post vehicles, but also a lot of just regular vehicles as well. On the federal fleet, I'm not 100% sure of all of the federal fleet, but that's a lot of vehicles overall that is like going to totally be pushed.
Yeah. The thing here is like total carbon footprint. It can't just be replacing with EVs. You need to have the factories powered with sustainable energy. You need to have the whole supply chain all the way down to the mining, to pulling the raw materials out of the ground. That all needs to be done with sustainable energy, and that means that like you're gonna have like again like so, whether you do economic incentives or regulation, whatever, but like we need to get raw material mining companies. We need to get them vehicles and equipment that operate on battery power and operate on electricity instead of operating on gas. We need the electric trucks that are charged using solar power and wind power and sustainable and hydropower, sustainable energy. We need factories to have solar panels on their rooftops, right? Like you need to address the entire supply chain and manufacturing chain. You can't just do like this end thing of like the electric vehicles. Like I'll take it, but it's not enough. It's not enough, and it's like so long as we continue to have all of the infrastructure and all of the power generation being emissive, it's like it's not gonna solve, like we're still gonna be carbon positive, and it's like we need to get to carbon negative very quickly.
Yeah.
It still feels pathetic to me.
Yeah,
like,
totally.
It's more ambitious than anything we've seen before, but to me it just still feels pathetic.
Totally. And I mean, I'm just happy that it's like for infrastructure and charging, and then because that helps all of us. That helps like you and me that already have a car, but then that helps everyone else too. But yeah, I've always been very, I never thought that, I never was hoping, or I was always hoping, but I never thought that during this administration we would see the real push against the fossil fuels. My thought was we were going to just see a push to electric vehicles, electric charging, because that's what's going to help those companies, right? Instead, if we pushed against fossil fuels, that would just hurt those companies. The only profits that they currently are getting, right, is like from the fossil fuel cars that they're selling. And in order to switch, they're going to need as much money as they can. So that would just tremendously hurt them. That could if we implemented a carbon tax, that could possibly be a changing factor of a lot of these companies, whether they stay alive or not. Because
adapt or die.
And I agree. I totally agree. But I think that's
like the vehicle.
Is that why it's not getting implemented? Because a lot of these corporations can persuade that specific thing. And that's why we see the other things get implemented.
Because these corporations are entrenched.
Yeah.
They suck at what they don't know what they're doing. They suck at this. They're not reading the terrain, and like they're getting a lot of money. Like the fossil fuel industry makes a lot of money. They get a lot of subsidies. They're in bed with all the legislators. These are very entrenched. This is a very entrenched industry that's been around for a long time, and it takes a lot to move them, and they're moving very slowly. And this is why Tesla has been so instrumental. Is like Elon Musk has managed, with a whole lot of luck. It's not just because he's a smart dude who works hard. There's a lot of luck involved in this too. Has managed to come out up front and force the hands of all of this, of vehicle manufacturers and the fossil fuel industry, kind of fossil fuel industry. And like, look, I want competition too. Competition's great, but like, we also need to allow dead companies to die. This is just like a thing that I see generally, which is like companies that have been around for a long time that no longer have their original founders tend to become really crappy, right? So let me flip the script. Companies that are young and have their original founders tend to be very mission focused. Like, it's not about the profits. It's about why I started the company in the first place and the problem that I'm trying to solve in the world, right? So like Tesla, for example, accelerating the world's transition to sustainable energy, right? SpaceX, making life multiplanetary, right? And they're not the only ones, right? A local restaurant that is like, I want to feed my community, right? It's like the founders of the company tend to be very mission focused, but then over time, when they retire, when they leave the companies, they're replaced by, all the original founders that leave the company, they're replaced by all these like business types and hedge fund, these investors and all this other crap that don't care about the mission. They only care about making money. And so when they're no longer focused on the mission, they're only focused on making money. Well, one of the ways that they found that they can make money is they can just lobby Congress to write them checks. And it's like, that's not competition. That's not how capitalism is supposed to work. If you're a fan of capitalism, that's not how capitalism is supposed to work. The government is not supposed to write checks to corporations. Corporations suck at what it's doing. You're supposed to let it die, because somebody else will come along and take over.
Yeah.
And like that's what I think needs to happen. You need to let these crappy companies that aren't going to continue living because the public conscience is shifting. Stop giving them subsidies and let them die, right? And
agree.
take this approach of the planet is dying. Cap and trade, I think, is better than a carbon tax. Because then you're actually limiting the amount of carbon that gets emitted. But it's like, let these companies either need to adapt or die, and it's up to them. And if they die, then we're going to see Rivians and we're going to see Lucids coming on the line with brand new, with better vehicles that are sustainable. The whole supply chain is sustainable. They're building infrastructure and power and chargers that run on completely sustainable energy. Like let the old guard die and let the new guys come in and take over.
Yeah.
That's my feelings on it. Like I'd rather encourage the new companies with original founders who are mission focused than sustaining these old companies that have no incentive to actually make the world a better place. They're only trying to make money.
Yeah. Which, you can almost see in like all the advertising they push. They're just like constantly pushing the advertising, and it's almost like a lot of their sales because of like 50 years of like constant advertising where like you're not even an American unless you buy this truck or whatever it is. And then it's like just so many things along the line. So one term that I called it was technological suppression, that like these companies were suppressing the technological advancement for just like having been so entrenched into the government and just like making sure that they stay alive, that like they're hindering those jobs that they're saying they're trying to save and all those things, when really it's like there could be so many more possibilities that we would have been here 20 years ago if we wouldn't. I think we bailed out GM 2 or 3 times. I'm not 100% sure exactly, but I agree. I totally agree on that as well. You kind of said it, I think, a little bit about, you maybe mentioned Starship a little bit. What do you think about Starship in Texas, Starship in general? And then, I kind of mentioned this too. What do you think about aliens? I always think that's a great subject, especially for like people in like, political, sense. I've always liked hearing about it. When you hear someone like that speak about it, it's just kind of like, I think everyone loves it, and it's just all around interesting. I think it's great. I think it's hard at this point not to believe in aliens, but hey, anyone can have an opinion of their own, I guess, at this point. So
yeah, so let's address Starship first, and then we'll talk about aliens.
Okay, yeah, Starship.
I'm super positive on Starship. Love it. Everything about it. I think it's great. I think people who are there. Some people are like, why are we spending all this money trying to go to Mars when we got problems here? I'm like, you're not understanding the scale. Starship is a $100 billion program, is what I'll call it. I'll call it $100 billion, which is more than what they've already spent on it, by the way. They've spent way less on it so far. We'll call it a $100 billion program. The amount of money it's going to take to fix the planet is more like $100 trillion. Like you are orders of magnitude off. It's not even a drop in the bucket compared to like what needs to happen down here. Like climate change is not going to be solved by private industry. The scale has gotten so out of control and so big that it can only be managed by wealthy governments, and it's going to require the European Union, United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, China, Russia, Brazil, hopefully someday Indonesia, if they ever get that together, to put forward trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars each every single year toward solving this climate, or solving our environmental disaster with carbon in the atmosphere and carbon in the ocean is the number one priority, right? We have put so much carbon, we've dug so much carbon out of the ground and put it out of deep underground and put it into the atmospheres and oceans that we won't be able to solve it only using natural means. We have to artificially capture it and pull it out of the atmosphere and the oceans and store it deep underground. It's called geologic sequestration, down deep in the rocks where we got it from in the first place. And there's no market value in that. People all the time are talking about, like, you can make it a market value by using it for plastics. It's like, okay, now you just have more plastic in the world. And what's the end game of plastic? The end game of plastic most likely is bacteria that consumes the plastic and turns it into carbon dioxide that releases it back to the atmosphere and oceans. Like, that's like that. You're just sequestering it in plastic now. Like, it needs to be sequestered deep underground where we got it from. That's what needs to be the end game of carbon in the atmosphere and oceans.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to be. We don't have to do this, right? But what would happen
if we all want to die?
Exactly. And it would cost more if we didn't, right? Like, if we didn't do this, we would just be like considering, like, putting everything on stilts and building seawalls and all sorts of like preventative measures of pumping water out of Miami, even though like it floods every middle of the day or whatever. They call it like noon.
Yeah.
It's just crazy.
It's way more expensive not to. But I'm saying, like, you want to save humanity, you want to save this planet, you want to save money. This is like, but like when I say market value, I mean, like, there's no business model for pulling carbon out of the atmosphere and ocean and storing it deep underground.
Yeah.
Like, there's no way to make money on that right now.
Yeah.
There's no economic model in our current economic system. There's no way for that to work. You could build economic systems that do have like an economic advantage to doing it, but currently we're not using any of them.
Yeah.
And because this problem is an immediate problem, like, wealthy governments just need to foot the bill. There's no way around it.
Yeah.
So, but Starship, let's focus on Starship. Super positive about Starship. Sounds like SN11 might be launching as early as next Wednesday. That'd be crazy because SN10 just landed, which was super cool. But yeah, I'd love it. Who knows if he has officially moved the rendezvous back one cycle. So now he's saying cargo trip in 2024 and people in 2026 rendezvous to Mars. They would land in 2027, which would be awesome. That'd be probably about 200 people is the current plan. And then from there, but super positive on Starship. I love it. I think everything about it, I think is great. I just think it's amazing.
And on the other topic, other thing you mentioned about how, and I feel that I agree with it. I watched Bill Maher a lot. He had a great bit about Planet A and Planet B, and he's like, he's like, and I loved it. I love the bit. He was like, Mars, no oxygen. Earth, oxygen. Mars, really far away. Earth, here, now. Like, he was saying we don't need to go there. He was saying your other thing. But on the opposite note, Tesla has already acquired technology that they've learned from SpaceX and with Cybertruck in the future. We are already, right? We are already how many years has been? A year or two, like a couple years of Elon Musk being like, oh wow, okay, now we're going to space. We can make the octavalve. Oh, the octavalve, and so our electric cars are now more efficient because they created the octavalve, which was like some SpaceX technology. The Cybertruck is going to be made with the same steel that the spaceship is made out of. Like, what other things can be,
We have no clue.
Exactly.
This is the point that people usually make in favor of like going to Mars. It's like, it's going to give us unforeseen technologies. I mean, we're literally going to want to terraform Mars. Mm-hmm. Well, that's going to teach us how to terraform Earth. Like, we're going to get all sorts of unforeseen technological advances that are going to be super helpful in dealing with our environmental crisis down here. And that's like another great reason to go to Mars.
Yeah, totally.
But like, I think that a more effective, simpler argument is the scale of the problem argument. I think that is like more down to earth and effective at just saying like, let me put a number value on it and show you why this means nothing in the scope of that. Yeah. I think that's going to land with people better than trying to like say like, there's a thing that you haven't thought of and that I haven't thought of that's going to answer your question some years down the line. But it's like, I can answer that question today using very simple numbers that are sitting in front of us.
Yeah.
So yes, you're absolutely 100% right.
Yeah.
Totally worth it for those reasons as well.
Yeah.
That's not the primary reason we should do it, but
Sure.
those are reasons on top, and that it will be helpful in that way. And we don't know, it could technology that's invented for Mars could end up saving us trillions of dollars down the road, and we just don't know.
Yeah.
A way to capture carbon in an efficient way. Maybe we'll learn how to capture carbon from dry ice at the poles of Mars or something.
Yeah.
And
or
that
take
will
all of
give
our
us
space
insight on
trash.
how we can capture what?
Take all of our space trash out into space and push it out into the sun. Just let it go.
Yeah, that's that one's a little more. I don't know about that one, but like maybe that will teach us more efficient ways to pull carbon out of the oceans. So there's a lot to gain from it. Like Starship, I only see that as like I said, I really like I struggle to find downside on Starship. It's really only a thing to gain from.
Would you want to go stay down there if they built a hotel in the Star City?
I probably would at some point. Yeah. I'd probably go down there.
Cool.
Watch it go long stop. I mean, they're building that whole. I mean, they're planning on just like basically subsidizing the building of an entire city. Is effectively what SpaceX is trying to do.
Wow. Yeah, totally. And what's your take on aliens? Like, and I kind of feel a little bit pessimistic as well. Like, I'm starting to feel like, well, we haven't seen them in a while. Time is going on, but like, there's that whole time continuum thing. Like, light travels at a certain speed, and then you have expansion, right? And like, is it possible that like we're just expanding at the rate to where it's making it harder and further? Or is it just like so many possibilities out there that it's just impossible that if at a certain point we're gonna run into somebody?
I'm optimistic.
Okay.
I think we'll find something.
Yeah.
I think we will. Longevity is a thing, right? Paths crossing. We've only been listening for decades. It's like, well, out of the billions of years that the galaxy has been around, it's like decades or nothing. And so like longevity is a thing. There's another thing too that's really interesting that I've been thinking about, which is if the Earth was about 10 to 15% bigger, we would not be able to leave it. We would it'd be impossible. The rocket equate we have the physics, we would not be able to leave. It'd be impossible. And at least as of right now, given the information we currently have, Earth is actually pretty small for most terrestrial planets in the galaxy. Most terrestrial planets are maybe like 5 times the size of Earth. And now that could be because it's just easier to see bigger planets. And so I can see that number coming down. But given what we know right now, and given the combination of those two things, it's not unreasonable that it's not unreasonable that it's like we may be one of the only intelligent species that actually will be able to leave the planet and go do things in the galaxy. And so that's a possibility. And I think that makes me more optimistic of like, oh, they could just be out there, but they're just not able to leave their planet because of the physics. And so that's exciting. That makes me more optimistic, thinking about that. But also, the longevity is a huge piece of it. And just thinking about, detecting life. It's hard. You could have life that's not carbon-based. You could have silicon-based life. That's a possibility. It's rare, but it's possible. And also just the life finds a way. That kind of thing. It's like the more and more we learn about primordial life on Earth, the further and further back the estimates for when life first started. I mean, the estimate is now that it happened in the first 100 million years of the Earth forming, which is crazy, right? It's like, man, if life can form on a planet that that hazardous to life, it's got to be able to start. And there's this other cool new idea that's floating around. This question of why does life exist if life fights entropy? So if entropy is this nature of the universe, why does life exist? It's actually this cool new idea. It's only been around for a few years, and it's just nobody had thought of it before, which is that actually life creates a lot more entropy. overall, it only fights entropy internally, but externally, have you created more, and you've created a lot more entropy than like
Yeah.
some rock sitting at the bottom of a canyon over the last 30 years or 20 years or whatever. Like, it's almost like if entropy is the nature of the universe, then the nature of the universe is to create life, because life creates a lot of entropy. It's very efficient at creating entropy. So I think that's another reason to say that like the universe wants life because life creates entropy. So and that's very high level. It's a little bit fuzzier and whatnot. Kind of messing with the words a little bit. But so like, yeah, I don't. I mean, I don't think that like Area 51 is like holding on to aliens or anything. If they got here first, no way in hell we're gonna be able to like overpower them or whatever.
Right. Yeah. That's my thought.
But so like I don't think that, but I am optimistic on aliens. I think we will find. I would think we will find life somewhere else. The question is always, will it be intelligent life?
Yeah.
It's also possible that like, what if we're the first ones?
Yeah.
Maybe somebody's got to be. Like, obviously the chances are astronomically low, but maybe we're the first ones.
Yeah.
Maybe we're the first. Maybe we're one of the first intelligent life in the galaxy, and that will end up being the rulers of the galaxy. That will be the first Kardashev type 1, type 2, type 3 civilization.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Somebody's got to be.
Which is funny because my thought whenever I think of aliens and stuff, I always think of like them coming here, like we see in a lot of the movies, right? They come here, and then we all, as like humans, that the human race, we see them here, and we're like, wow. But like now that I think about it, with Starship and with the way things could possibly go, and it does actually look more like, well, we would be. It's going to be traveling and probably something that we're going to maybe go to another planet, and they're going to be there. Like you were saying, they may not even be that intelligent. It just may be the fact that we're going to another place and they haven't even left it yet. And like maybe that's actually where we're going to see someone else, is when we finally, like hundreds of thousands of years in the future, like are going to somewhere else, right? Instead of that thought in our head of them coming to us.
Maybe we're the aliens all along.
Yeah. Well, everyone is at that point, right? I mean, we all are just stardust. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, man, this has gone on pretty long here. It's 2 hours now. I guess the only other topic I've really had, other than Texas Energy, ERCOT, we kind of talked a little bit about that. Yeah, I don't even feel like I need to ask you. I already know what your topic on what your take on that is. It's just a bunch of BS. It's crazy. I guess the other big news is that like Denver passed this new marijuana law. That's kind of big for Texas. I feel like that's going to be next big news coming up, is like, when is Texas going to legalize? So Denver just approved a bill for home delivery, cultivation, I think, cancellations, and a bunch of different things. They were saying that this is like the biggest cannabis movement since like 2014 or whatnot. But yeah, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, like, dude, weed is a pretty soft drug, man. Like, there are prescription drugs that are more powerful than weed. And so like, yeah, man, I'm down with making a consumer thing, and like delivery, like, yeah, like get high people off the roads. That's fine with me, man.
Okay, so yeah, that's a good aspect to think, because what they were saying, a lot of like, they don't have federal backing, so a lot of these businesses have to build like a vault in their business, because they have to keep cash on hand. There's so many different downsides. The amount of taxes that they got was starting to baffle me when going over this, and all of the taxes now that I looked into, the taxes from all the cannabis goes to schools, it goes back to law enforcement, it goes to education, it goes to so many things that are great, and it seems to be doing well for Colorado. So my question is, or I'm just wondering, like, I wonder how long this would be, and like, when is it going to be Texas' turn, or when is it going to be all the South's turn, is what it seems.
Texas is not going to turn until it becomes federal.
You think that will be what it be?
Yeah, I don't think Texas is going to turn before it becomes until it changes over federally. So much like with marriage equality, it was about half the states had it, and then the whole country did it all at once.
Yeah.
I think that's what weed's going to go the same way, and Texas as a state is not going to be a first mover on that.
Yeah, because Texas, if we were a first mover, we make everyone else kind of do the same. Everyone kind of looks up to Texas, I feel, in a way, almost.
Well, I don't even put it like that.
Or like,
I mean, I think this is the nature of our state legislature that only meets once every 2 years. You know, it's like it. You're not Texas law, state law just isn't like a thing that changes often. It's just not a thing that moves around or changes very much. Oops, excuse me.
Yeah.
That's just the nature of this state. It's just how it's based. It's just how our constitution was written. It's just what this state is. So I don't ever really see. I don't see Texas being the first mover on things like this.
Wow.
Yeah, if like in Austin, you know, we can get our weed in Austin. But I mean, I don't really smoke, but yeah, I don't hold out on the Texas state legislature to change it.
Sure.
It's gonna be a national change before you can be sure legal weed in rural Texas.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah, and I've always felt that way. I've always said that previously. But it's like every time it happens somewhere else, or like these big news happens, I'm like, oh, maybe this will be it. And then it's like, I guess not. Like maybe it's just going to be this big divide. There's just that big divide of like the South kind of east and like a few other states kind of going. And like as they keep going further and further. So I guess once it changes, it's just going to maybe change like, you know, how we're going to be so far advanced in those bills. Things have changed so much, you know, compared over the years that, like, I guess once it changes, it's just going to be a big change over the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, this is the I mean, like, you know, it's like I use marriage equality because that's a recent example, that's like recent memory, but like there have been countless things throughout U.S. history that have happened in the same way. Slavery was one of them. I mean, we didn't actually abolish slavery. We just moved it behind prisons where we didn't have to look at it anymore. But I mean, yeah, there have been I mean, this is like kind of the classic way to create change in the United States is and I said this at the beginning with the voting system, so you start at the bottom and you work your way up. And so eventually it will be a nationwide thing. And I predict that will come before the Texas state legislature changes the law to allow weed in Texas. I'd love to be wrong.
Yeah.
I'd love it'd be great if
Sure.
in 2 years from now the next state legislature we get a bunch of great people elected in and they flip on it. That'd be awesome. Because you know that we just incarcerate a lot of people who don't need to be incarcerated. It's incredibly expensive. It destroys our communities and our economies, and it's all negative. So that's my prediction.
Yeah, you know, and on that note, I was also thinking the new homeless bill is in Austin, right? There's like there's a new it's not a bill, right? It's was it Prop B? I think it's Prop B or something. And there's a lot of talk of legalization of all drugs, like in Seattle and some other places, which I don't.
Mushrooms in like Oregon or Washington or something.
Sure, and mushrooms fine, but like, you know, is there a point where it's too far? Is there a point like that where like we shouldn't be doing these other things like in Seattle or San Francisco, they have like I think the free areas where you can go and do certain drugs, and like that it's a, which I'm sure it's much better, but like is that still kind of promoting, you know, bad habits or drug use, and then mixed with that like also like homelessness, is that just because a lot of people I feel now we're starting to talk where it's a divided kind of thing. Like we got it passed, but now there's like people that don't want the homeless on the streets anymore because they see they've had these negative effects, and so now
where do you want them to go?
Where would I want them to go? That's the question, right? That's the debate. I'm not saying that I agree one way or the other. I don't know honestly what I feel now. I just do think that there seems to be a lot of, and this is like a totally hard subject for a lot of people to talk about. Not a lot of people talk about the side of like, it seems like there's like a drug issue that has financial backing that is getting mixed into like the homeless crisis, right? Like it could be opioids, it could be all of these other problems that we've had. I feel is kind of merging and making this problem worse because they're on the streets, and maybe having housing like and the hotels is a solution so that they're at least off the streets and not able to be manipulated or
Prop B doesn't do that.
Prop B doesn't do that? What do you mean by that?
It's not. Prop B just makes quote unquote public camping illegal. It makes it what it does is it just criminalizes homelessness. That's all it does.
Okay.
What does that accomplish?
Yeah.
Prettier streets? No, you're just arresting homeless people now for being homeless.
Yeah.
It doesn't solve the homelessness problem. That's it. That's the whole story there. Prop B doesn't solve anything.
It doesn't have a solution.
No, their solutions exist. Prop B is not a solution to any problem, other than you don't like looking at homeless people. Like, okay, well, then solve homelessness, which we know how to do. We know how to solve homelessness. You can Google this, how to solve homelessness, and you'll end up on the United States Interagency Council on Homelessness on the solutions page, and it says, we know what it takes to end homelessness. The solutions are highlighted below. There are 8 things it lists. Some of this stuff can be really helped out by the federal government. Universal basic income, universal quality healthcare are going to be huge. Some things are more municipal, about building partnerships, strengthening crisis response, which I think there could be federal subsidies for, fostering education connections. That would be, that's federal level, like funding public education. That's state level, building the infrastructure. That's municipal level, helping, there's a lot of things that happen here, but like, again, this comes back to like incentives of those who are in power, right? So like Mayor Adler, like who funds his campaigns? Executives, lawyers, and real estate developers, right? He has no incentive to put up multifamily, cheap, or I don't want to say cheap, but low cost multifamily units, and just giving them to homeless people and just putting it on the bill of the city, because that's way less expensive than like what we're currently in. If you house people and you give them money and you give them food and you give them health care, that's way cheaper than not doing it.
Sure.
It was kind of coming back to this whole like dealing with our environmental crisis is way cheaper than not dealing with it.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. So like we know how to solve homelessness, and Prop B is not a solution to it.
Yeah. Or what about the hotels? Recently, I think there's 2 things now about housing them in a hotel, and then the neighborhoods or someone around it. There's a block that's nearby. There's protests going on. What do you think about that? Like, of course, the community, I think, has the right to voice their opinion and what they think, but it is putting them in a hotel a solution as well? What kind of what kind of things about that do you think? Yeah.
Hotel is temporary. Like it takes time to get all this stuff in motion and to make things happen, to get the infrastructure in place, and it takes time for people to recover and become healthy enough to, go find a job and get the health services they need, go find their own place to live, their own apartment or whatever. Like that all takes time. Like, I am totally down for the city just paying hotels for homeless people to stay in them. Like that's what, like it's a private business. I don't, and it's all local. I don't think that should be like government mandated. The hotels need to be able to sustain themselves. And I'm okay with the city just paying the hotels, building partnerships with the hotels, and paying the hotels to house homeless folks while helping them get back up on their feet and giving them money and food and health care and get their IDs and get resumes in order and find other more sustainable housing and helping them to rehabilitate and get off drugs and like doing all of these other things that take time. While that's happening, I'm totally down with the city paying hotels for homeless people to stay in it, because you just need to get them under a roof. That's a really important thing, that people have a place to secure their stuff and a place to sleep at night. So I'm totally, that's a real solution. Prop B does none of that. And so that's what I'd be in favor of. Of course, you got to actually convince Mayor Adler and the city council and prompt the city manager to actually do that stuff. And again, that comes back to the incentives of elected officials, which is what my whole like government accountability thing is about, and changing voting systems. But like that's the real solution. And then I also want to address this like drug thing too that you mentioned. We should legalize or decriminalize the use of all drugs, all of them.
Decriminalize or legalize.
What?
Decriminalize or legalize.
Decriminalize, bare minimum decriminalize. I would also probably say, yeah, I'd say legalize too. I mean, decriminalize at the bare minimum. You don't want to be arresting people for a health problem, for a disease. Addiction is a disease, and this is like the DSM-5 states that it's a disease. There's no like, this is by definition, addiction is a disease.
Totally.
And it should be treated that way, right? Turns out you want a healthier society, so you got to focus on health. And so it's at the same time, though, it's both and you can't just decriminalize, you can't just legalize. At the same time, you also have to build and provide the infrastructure and like free, robust rehabilitation and health treatment services for any and all who need or want it. You are addicted, you want some help, it will be there for you, it will be free, you'll be able to get all the help that you want. And Portugal, among other countries, Portugal was kind of the first one to do this, has shown us that it works. It's really effective. Yeah. Over a decade, it was a huge problem. They cut drug use in half by doing this, and it still continues to trend down. It's like, we want to solve these problems. We want to solve this health problem. We have to focus on health. And the other thing, there's also another thing. If you care about immigration, like you're worried about like drug cartels, man, if you made heroin, if you decriminalized heroin and you gave safe injection sites, all of a sudden the black market for, if people could buy like safe drugs, like of any kind from the government, even if it was more expensive and you had taxes on them and stuff, people could safely buy it from the government. That would destroy the black market. It would disappear. There'd be no incentive for the drug cartel anymore to continue operating in the United States. If that's something you're worried about, that you have a whole problem with, and that gets you all up in a bunch about immigration, legalizing drug use and having the government sell it to people is a great way to destroy economically destroy the drug cartel. Like, boom, that's another problem that you solve. And the other thing too is like it all pays for itself, because increase in productivity from having a healthier populace, right? Eliminating all the costs from like imprisoning people, all the money that the government spends on incarceration, that all disappears. All that money can be used to make these people healthier. So you don't even need to like find new sources of funding. It pays for itself, literally and immediately.
Yeah, well, just like in Colorado, how most of the taxes from the marijuana bill goes back to specific drug education, drug rehabilitation, all that type of stuff. Not just for marijuana, but probably all the way around. It probably just goes straight to their drug rehabilitation program that they had, and that program has probably done so much better now that they're getting this extra funding, from that straight drug being legalized. So.
Yeah. And I'm interested in solutions that work, and these are solutions that have been tried in other places and they work. Yeah. Yeah. So let's do what works instead of continuing to do what doesn't work.
Yeah, that sounds great.
That's where I don't even need to make the moral argument, the humanity argument of like we should just take care of each other. Like, yes, I agree with that, but like, let's also just do things that make sense. Yeah. And now this makes sense. The evidence.
Most Americans, I think, all agree on that now. I think this is definitely a high majority thing that everyone generally agrees on, at least with cannabis, maybe not the rest. Yeah.
Yeah, let's be careful. Yeah, weed is getting super.
That was my topic. The rest is still pretty far out there. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like it's catching on. It's like we got to be careful about our echo chambers. And like there are a lot of people who haven't been exposed to this information, and it's like it's just getting the information out there. It's about it's just a lot of people believe things that aren't true, and it's not their fault. They just get told things that aren't true every single day, and they're never, it's like they're never confronted about it. They're never given information to the contrary, and it's like that would be true of any of us, right? I mean, like I used to believe weed was this awful thing that would kill you. It's like That's not true, right? But I believed it because that's what I was told every single day, and that's what I was, that's what everybody was telling me. It's like this applies to adults too. It's like you have to remember, like, this is something I think I said this to you yesterday. My stream was like, we're all brainwashed. Every single one of us is brainwashed. All of us in some capacity. It's like you got to keep that in mind, man. Like they're gonna, like, think about all the things that like you've been wrong about in the past, and like most of the things that you think you're right about, you're probably also wrong about, but you just haven't figured it out yet. And so like that's a huge thing. It's like the sooner you come to grips with like this realization of like nobody is smart, everybody is stupid, every single person on this planet is an idiot, and including yourself, like the world becomes much easier, and like you less stressful of like, like this person messed up because they're an idiot just like everybody else, and like, oh yeah, like I messed up because I'm an idiot just like everybody else. Like this is way easier to deal with this kind of, like, you get way less emotional about it. It's way less, the world gets a lot less stressful when you just accept that you and everybody else is just dumb because nobody is smart.
I like it. It's definitely an easy way of looking at life. We can't all be Elon Musk, and we're definitely not, right? We're definitely not all.
Elon Musk is wrong too sometimes, man. He made some pretty cherry picking about that COVID-19 stuff way back in April. It was like, dude, you're really cherry picking the data here, man.
That's. Well, we've been on for almost 2 hours now. There is one last question. I guess we'll go ahead and topic. This is Texas, so he says, "What about guns?" And I think most people now are pretty much on the same topic on that too. Like, we all want just smart gun reform. We want smart, like you said, we want the most kind of like up-to-date information of what we should do, and right? I mean, what are your thoughts? What do you think about what should we do with guns? Should there be more regulations? Are they fine where they're at? What do you think?
You also got to appease the people who have guns because they have guns. Like there's this piece of it of like, yeah, they have, I don't have any guns. They do. Like they kind of like, there's a limit. So, and I do believe in like, I would never want to take guns away from the people generally before taking away from like the police and the military, right? Like I do believe in, I do understand the angle of fighting back against a tyrannical government. This is a difficult subject, obviously. So I'll start with this. I've kind of a short-term and long-term thing. So short-term, there are over 40,000 gun deaths in the United States every year. More than half of those are suicides. The root cause of suicide is economic disparity. It's culture. It's mental health. It's all of these other things. The root cause is not guns, but the method matters. Suicide with a gun is far more deadly than suicide with other methods. It's 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 times more lethal than other methods of suicide. And that matters because when people survive a suicide attempt, I think it's over 90% of the time, they go on to live long, fulfilling lives. They don't end up dying from suicide down the line. That second chance is really powerful and it's really important. If you can remove guns from the equation, from the suicide equation, you can save a lot of lives. It's not the solution. It is a Band-Aid. It is symptom treating. It is not disease curing. It's not meant to. But suicide is a symptom that you cannot recover from. There are some very simple, quick, and easy things that we can do right now to dramatically reduce the number of gun deaths. Things like universal background checks, things like universal waiting periods. These are simple things that we can do right away. Closing private gun show loopholes and stuff that can just save a lot of lives. It's not gonna get us from 40,000 to 0. It's not meant to. It's meant to get us from 40,000 down to 30,000, 20, 10, or 5. That's what it's meant to do, because solving the root causes, solving the diseases, it's going to take a lot of money, energy, resources, people, and most importantly, time. It's not going to happen overnight. We're not going to, solving the disease is going to take a lot of time. And so, how do we solve the disease? Well, universal basic income, universal quality healthcare, right? These are huge. Shifting the way that we culturally, this like separation of physical health and mental health is poisonous. They are arguably one and the same. Things like how many the number used to be 22 vets a day. I think it's down to 19, which is great, but it needs to be 0. In the military, if you check a box, and this is the same for nurses in emergency rooms, this is the same for like police and a lot of departments. If you check a box that says, "Hey, I experienced something traumatic, I need some help," you can lose hours, you can get pay cuts, you can lose your position, you can get punished in all these other ways. And so instead, they don't check the box, and they just have to deal with this trauma in their own way. And typically, the way that that's dealt with is compartmentalization. And like that's what police do, man. They can't live their lives after seeing some of the stuff that they see unless they compartmentalize it off. You can't blame them. It's human nature. It's a defense mechanism. And so if I would want to just write a law saying that, like, if you say that you need help, like mental help for dealing with traumatic things in any profession, from like private industry, public sector, whatever, you cannot have, like, unless you want to get any pay cut of any kind, no demotion of any kind. You stay the same. That's really powerful. Reverse boot camp for military. You're coming out of the military. You go through boot camp when you get into the military to get on the very regimented schedules. Come out of boot camp, you can have a reverse boot camp to help get reacclimated to normal life. These are some of the more comprehensive things to start dealing with these problems. I do think that there should be a requirement on like you have to go through a certain amount of like gun safety in order to get a gun. You have to get a driver license to drive a car. You should have to get a license to carry a gun, in my opinion. But that's also getting more comprehensive, and kind of now we're getting into what I think a more sustainable long-term solution might be. So before I get into long-term, I just want to pause and let you respond.
Yeah, I agree with all of those things as well. Because definitely, yeah, it's a hard subject, and especially here in Texas, you have a lot of just pushback on from Second Amendment and all that. People don't want to see any change really, but definitely, like, I think licenses, those things, to me, like, most even gun owners totally agree with that. Everyone agrees with that. You should have to have a license. Mental health as well. Like, you have to have a mental health check. You don't have to have a mental check with the car, even though maybe some of us should. We probably should have a mental check to drive.
You should. It's a deadly weapon. It is too easy to get a driver license in this country. It's too easy to
and that does happen. Like, people do drive vans. Like, that's the thing. Drive vans into crowds and stuff.
Vehicle deaths every year in this country.
Yeah.
40,000 vehicle deaths a year in this country.
Yeah.
It's too easy to get a license in this country.
Yeah, like, in general. So we should definitely have. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
What I think is the more sustainable long-term solution that's compatible with the Second Amendment is empowering the gun community to regulate itself through the empowerment of local militias. To write their own regulation and rules. There would still be federal guidelines to fill in the gaps and ensure minimum standards are met and all this stuff. But one way that this could look is, let's say you want to get a firearm of a certain kind. Well, now you got to check in with your local militia, maybe county level, I think makes the most sense, but it doesn't have to be that. And say, okay, well, in order to get this type of gun that has a very high muzzle energy, you have to go through this amount of safety training, and you have to register in this certain way and do these certain things. Or maybe maybe all the ammo has to be kept at the firing range or something, whatever it may be. But guns are a community level issue. You fire a gun in California, it doesn't kill somebody in New York. And so by bringing it down to the community level, you give much more voice to gun owners and the people, including gun owners who are fighting for safety. I had an extended conversation with somebody on the phone the other day who, she and her husband own 7 guns, but she's also part of the Moms for some kind of Moms for Gun Defense or something. I'm trying to remember what it's called. I should know this. but she's like, she's fighting for gun safety and more regulation around it. And it's like, your voice is going to be much stronger at the local level than it is at the national level. And by giving gun owners who really care about gun safety more voice at the local level, you can get kind of the regulation that you're looking for that makes more sense for your community. And if there are a lot of gun deaths in a community, you can hold that militia accountable, and you can say, okay, clearly the regulations that you have in place aren't effective. They're not enough. The rules that you have in place are causing a lot of people to die. So you got to change your rules. And to enforce that, right, you can, I think this is a job that can be done through the Department of Defense. So better funding and legislatively empowering the Department of Defense, which already exists. That's going to help with holding police departments accountable nationwide, but I think it could also help to hold local militias accountable nationwide as well. So I think that this could be a really powerful way to give gun owners real voice in their communities and in the way that guns are handled in their communities and the way that their guns affect them. So I think that this kind of decentralization as a long-term solution could make a lot of sense in the United States, given the specific language of the Second Amendment.
Yeah, I never really heard it put that way. I like that idea, because the opposite thing, when you said that a gun in one state doesn't shoot and kill someone in another, that made me think about, well, someone can't buy it though in that one state that has that easy gun law and just drive it over that other state that has that strict gun law. And so is an answer having a federal law where it's not state by state and it's just all one law. Like, it doesn't that seem to be a problem in America overall, that like with marijuana laws, you can go to Colorado and buy marijuana and just drive it over here, or you could go over there and take advantage of that law and then just go over there.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, we see that all the time. I mean, look at all the LLCs in Delaware, right?
Yeah.
So this is why I'm saying there would be federal guidelines travel. And then when you get to that new place, you're now under the jurisdiction of the local militia over there, and you got to learn the rules of that militia. And you could require that militias publish all their rules and regulations online, so that way you can check it out before you travel somewhere, if you do want to travel with a gun. But it's like, you can also trace things back to the origin. If that gun was bought under a militia somewhere else and they went, to a different state and massacre, then like you trace that back to the militia, to the community where they bought that gun from under that militia, and that original militia is the one that's going to be held accountable much more than the one where it happened, depending on where it all happens. But again, that's what the Department of Justice is for, to help sort out those confusing situations. So it's not perfect. It's going to take time and tweaking, but you're trying to satisfy everybody in the country, with this, and it's like, okay, well, in order to do that, it's like, I see this as a workable solution. It's not, you're never going to have something perfect, but I think that this is workable, and I think that you can give power to local gun owners. And it was also kind of interesting too, though. I think that a valid counter argument that woman gave me was like, the people who tend to be the loudest about relaxing gun regulation are people who don't have guns because they can't get them, and they're mad about that. But it's like, if you can't get a gun right now in the U.S., like, the argument is like, if you like it's pretty easy to get a gun in the U.S. If you can't get a gun right now in the U.S., you probably shouldn't be able to get a gun. Right, you probably shouldn't be that kind of person. And so I understood that fear, but I do think that people will stand up for safety in their own communities because it really affects them, and because your voice is louder, that you'll be able to do something about it. And also, like, it's not just the militias. Like, if you could have a municipal code that further restricts militias or whatever, like, so you don't have to necessarily be in the militia to make those rules. If that militia is restricted by a local municipal code or whatever, but that still gives regular citizens a voice in what happens in their community with guns. And so like, that's I think the well-regulated militia. I think that is a way that is compatible with the language of the Second Amendment, that gives voice to people fighting for gun safety, including gun owners.
Mm-hmm. So no, just broad overall like assault rifle ban.
I wouldn't say none, but
Sure.
I'm saying that like this is a hard balance to make, right?
Yeah.
Having national registry, having universal background checks, having requiring waiting periods. These are like I think some simple things that you could say at the national level would be required. And then rules about travel and stuff. So I'm not saying no, I'm not saying nothing at the federal level, but I'm just saying like finding that right balance of like, okay, what do we do at the federal level, and then what do we allow to be up to local militias and local legislation. I think that can be, like I said, empowering legislatively empowering local militias to create regulation and safety around guns. I think having that mix can be a really powerful way to ensure that we don't have national tragedies while also giving voice to people who previously haven't had a voice. Because right now it's basically just the NRA lobbying Congress for these one-size-fits-all solutions across the whole country, but it's going to look different in different communities, and we should allow it to
totally. Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, that's good. I really like that you brought that up, because at first I was like, we kind of all feel like that. But that was like a perfectly, the way you put it, which is so much, I feel like so much easier to go. And that goes back to kind of our conversation. Like you wanted to say, like we kind of spoke about this earlier, is that like finding a way to talk to people on both sides, finding a way to have a conversation, just like sit down and have a conversation about topics. And that's kind of what this was. So I think maybe this could be a good cutoff point for us here, because I hear my kid out there getting a little wild. Yeah, so we might have to cut this off, but I'd like to cut it off too, because I don't want to just go on and everything, because I'd like to have you back on and do this again sometime. So we need to have something to say again. Maybe we do this next week. Maybe we can try to do this every Friday or something, and just do it like a Friday thing, or maybe we'll find a day for it or something. But
figure it out. Yeah, we'll figure something out.
All right. Well, Sass, tell them again where to find you. Are you on Instagram, Facebook, all that good stuff?
Yep, I'm on all of that. And then the easiest way, the central hub, voteforsass.com, voteforsass.com. And then if you're looking for social media specifically, you can just go to the Connect tab. If you're on mobile, it'll just be in the little menu, Connect. You'll find all my social media. That's the really easiest way, but you'll also be able to read more about my platform. You'll be able to donate if you want to volunteer. Right now, it's mostly just phone banking, but down the road, there will be more opportunities. Just shoot me a direct message. You can through the website, or you can shoot me a direct message on social media. I'm pretty responsive, but voteforsass.com. That's the central hub. That's where you go to do anything.
Awesome.
And everything.
And I did have one other question for you, actually. Someone mentioned, why don't you have your last name anywhere? Are you going to give out your last name, or are you hiding it, or what's up? Someone actually really wanted to know. They said because
Sass is a mononym.
Okay.
Sass is a mononym. That's what's going to be on the ballot. It's 4 letters. That's
okay.
it. That's all you're going to see.
That's what you get. I actually like it, because I think that makes it easier, concise. That's who you are. You're Sass. And yeah, I like that. Yeah, cool. All right. Well, thanks a lot for coming on. I really enjoyed it. I had a great time, and we'll have to do this again for sure. And I will leave everybody.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Brian.
You're welcome. I think it was great. I had a fun time, and definitely want to do it again. And I'll leave everyone with your website as well.
All right. Thanks. All right. Bye.
Thanks. Have a good night, and we'll see you next time. Everybody have a good night out there. And again, go to Sass, voteforsass.com. And why not? Click on donate. Everybody, have a good night. Thanks again for watching.